3 sentences in, the fire truck screamed down our street, a monstrous red blur, and there she was parked nose to hydrant like she owned the intersection. I still remember the way her sunglasses caught the sun, how calm she looked when everything around her was about to unravel. If you like drama, stick with me. This one's got a rooster crow of entitlement, a hose, and a ruined SUV for dessert. My name's Eli Carter. I've lived on Willow Ridge for 12 years, and I tell stories on my porch because that's where people slow down, sip on bad coffee, and finally admit what they're really thinking. So let me tell you what happened the morning Marjorie Blake decided a fire hydrant was her personal valet spot. Marjorie had moved in last summer, a neat house with 2 many polished stones and a mailbox that cost more than my first car. She'd been on the HOA board for 2 months and on a crusade to micromanage everyone's hedges since day one, but that morning wasn't about hedges. It was about a street being on fire and one person's belief that community rules apply to other people. The call came in like a bad movie, smoke curling above the Thompson place at the end of the block, kids filing out of their house shirtless, Mrs. Alvarez on the porch waving a towel. I was still in pajamas, barefoot on my lawn, when the sirens hit. I remember thinking, in that half-awake way you think when the world flips, that the fire truck would have what it needed. I didn't think about a shiny black SUV, squat in front of the hydrant, chrome glinting like a taunt. Marjorie was leaning against it, phone in hand, very composed, as if she'd planned the whole tableau. "Excuse me," someone yelled as the truck rolled to a stop, but it was Captain Holt who cut through the morning with a voice like a door closing. "Vehicle in front of hydrant, move it now." Marjorie blinked, like she'd been summoned by a minor inconvenience instead of a 10-ton machine full of people trying to stop a house from going up. She folded a hand over her mouth, then smiled that tight, polite smile that says you mean business and the rest of us are beneath your business. "I'm just running in for a minute," she said, voice syrupy. "My meeting's at 9. That's when you could hear the whole street hold its breath. 3 kids were crying in the yard. A dog was yelping as smoke rose like a bad curtain, and the truck crew didn't have a minute to waste. Captain Holt and his team started barking orders. Ropes went out. Tools clanged. The men were professionals, calm in the way people who face chaos for a living are calm. They assessed the car, said the obvious. There was no time to wait for a tow, no time for courtesy. "We pull the window," one firefighter told the captain, "because a door takes time and the hose needs to be attached now." Marjorie's eyes flicked between the hose and her license plate, like someone watching their life fall off a shelf. And then the cinematic part happened. A firefighter wrapped his gloved hand around the window edge and with a muffled thud glass surrendered. It was rapid, brutal, precise, and just after the glass rained down, everyone on the block felt something shift: relief, horror, and the sweet, guilty satisfaction of watching consequence land where entitlement had parked. Marjorie screamed. It was a sound like a kettle hitting boil. "You can't do that. That's my property. You can't." Captain Holt didn't argue. He moved like a man whose job was to stop houses burning down, not to mediate privilege. "Get clear," he ordered, and a hose the size of a python slid through the broken window, a contradiction of violence and mercy. After the water and smoke and the smell of something expensive starting to cook, the fire went out not before the Thompson porch rail was charred and the grill was a blackened skeleton, but the house would stand. People clapped awkwardly like you clap after a small miracle, and then someone, of course, started filming. Marjorie stood there, robe flapping like some suburban flag of fury, and she did what most of us do when the narrative turns against us. She blamed the system and everyone else. "You broke my window," she shouted as the crowd circled. Phones up, faces lit by screens. "I'm going to sue. I'm going to the HOA. This is..." She had lists, a litany of lawsuits that began somewhere in her throat and ended in City Hall. But Captain Holt walked up to her like he was carrying more than authority. He was carrying the collective memory of people who understood risk. He said, quietly, "We saved lives today. That's the priority." The words weren't triumphal. They were a ledger of human priorities, a simple math where hoses and people came before metal. What made this messy wasn't just the broken window or a ruined SUV, it was the motive beneath Marjorie's actions, and the reasoning others had for letting her park there at all. See, Marjorie had been running a campaign at HOA meetings to preserve property values, which is code for tightening rules in ways that conveniently targeted whoever she didn't like. She'd showed up at board meetings with printouts and a smile, tucked in a thread of moral authority. People listened because she was polished and persistent. Some voted with her folder of community improvement suggestions, and a few, exhausted and indifferent, found parking in front of a hydrant an easy compromise for their mornings. It wasn't simply malice. It was the slow rot of a community learning to accept small exceptions if the person making them wore a tie or a certain shade of lipstick. The legal fallout was its own odd little soap. Marjorie sent fury-fueled emails, full of uppercase and accusations, to the HOA, to the mayor's office, to anyone with an office and a stamp. "This is an attack on my property rights," she wrote, as if the window had been a sacrament. Her post on the neighborhood group read like a manifesto. "When will communities stop allowing bullies to steal our freedoms?" She positioned herself as the victim, and social media did its thing. Half the block sided with public safety. The other half loved the spectacle of someone being publicly undone. I won't pretend the aftermath was clean. Marjorie filed a suit. The insurance companies audited policies. The HOA held an emergency meeting where tempers were thin and coffee was thick. In court, footage from the morning was played unedited, noisy, and utterly damning. The judge looked at the videos and at the charred porch and said what most sane people were thinking. When you put a life-or-death tool out of service for convenience, the law doesn't bend. The case was dismissed. Marjorie paid for the window out of pocket, filed her grievances anyway, and the neighborhood found itself holding a new rulebook in its hand. No parking within a set radius of any hydrant, no exceptions, period. But what stayed with me, long after the insurance checks and HOA memos, was the way the town reacted to the moral question. Who gets to bend the rules and why? We all saw how small concessions stack. We all felt how easy it is to excuse a neighbor's convenience when the ask is tiny and the beneficiary is polished. The hydrant became a symbol not of law, exactly, but of the choice to prioritize someone's comfort over someone's safety. People started taking pictures of cars illegally parked and leaving photocopied notes on windshields. Reminder of consequence notes. Nothing fancy, just a line for your neighbors, for the kids, for the people who might need that hydrant. There was also the human side of it. Captain Holt came around to talk at the school about fire safety, and he showed the kids the hose and the gloves and explained why that glass had to break. He told them about priorities and how sometimes people have to make hard calls. He didn't say it to shame Marjorie, he said it to teach. Marjorie, meanwhile, retreated into lawsuits that went nowhere and angry forum posts that read like steam released from a kettle. She lost some friends, gained a few followers online who loved her rage, and learned that people's patience has an end. If I had to draw a moral, and I resist tidy morals because life doesn't love them, I'd say this: small acts of entitlement are the leak that floods the whole house. One person parking in front of a hydrant doesn't just inconvenience a truck, it tells a neighborhood what it values. And once that message goes out, it's hard to reel back. We learned a lesson the hard, loud way. Community is not a set of rules you pick at convenience. It's a set of tiny, sometimes boring agreements we keep so that, on the day things go sideways, someone else's child has a chance. I also learned something about watching a person unravel. It wasn't about glee for me, I'm not that kind of person. It was about watching entitlement meet consequence and realizing how much of our personal pride is wrapped up in things that can be replaced. A window can be fixed, an SUV can be cleaned or sold, but the idea that you are somehow untouchable, that's fragile. And when that shell cracks, people see the human inside, sometimes for the first time. So here's the picture I want to leave you with. A hydrant, bright and useless for a moment, then turned back to purpose by people who didn't ask permission to do the right thing. A woman, furious and diminished by a cracked window, who kept lecturing about rights when the rest of us were busy practicing responsibility. A community that decided, finally, that common safety beats curated convenience. And me, on my porch, telling you this not to judge, but to ask, where do you draw the line between comfort and common good? If you've got a story like this, or if you think I'm the worst judge of character on the planet, say it below. Tell me what you'd have done, what you think Marjorie deserved, or where you think communities fail the people who need them most. Share it, comment, and if you liked hearing this, stick around. There's always another neighbor doing something that'll make a story worth telling.